Hello everyone, back here with round 8 of the Chess Olympiad 2022. And yeah, thankfully I've recorded this in the future, so yeah, what happened here is that unfortunately in this round, Faisal tested positive for COVID, for SARS-CoV-2. He did experience symptoms of COVID-19, and he had concomitant food poisoning, and yeah, he had to be hospitalized. Thankfully, he's now completely fine. That has passed, and he did play in later rounds. But yeah, here we were playing down a player, round 8, and yeah, actually some pairing things happened, some pairing shenanigans, but we won't get into those. Anyway, so here we're only playing on 3 boards, so let's see what we can do against the very strong North Macedonia team, the North Macedonian team. So let's see what Kaloust was able to do against his esteemed opponent, Stanojoski Zvonko. So let's check out this game. Goes into a Fianchetto structure, and now a Fianchetto Benoni. And now knight a6 by his opponent, a very interesting move actually. Of course, the more natural knight f6 is more common and more reasonable, but knight a6 is fine. The point is to play the standard Benoni maneuver and try to get b5 in. So knight f3, knight c7 in line with the plan, knight f3 developing, a4 blocking b5, for the moment at least, knight f6 development, knight c3 development, castles, castles, rook b8 preparing b5, queen c2 developing this queen and perhaps preparing or solidifying e4, and now knight a6, a move I'm not really fond of. I'd rather continue with the plan, but here Stanojoski sees that knight b4 would be a good move, and he's basically correct, but yeah, I would prefer, like, the other way of playing would be more accurate for me. e4 now, a principled reaction, gaining control of the center and perhaps trying to go for e5 later on. Bishop g4, also a very principled reaction. This bishop is very much hemmed in, so it would like to trade itself off. Maybe not immediately, but in the future. Yeah, these pawns, okay, like these pawns mean that this bishop is a good one, but it's very inactive, it doesn't have any squares, and these pawns mean that the bishop is really under pressure. So yeah, so it's better to trade it off. And here after h3, asking the question to the bishop of course trades itself off. Bishop takes f3, knight b4 natural, and now queen d1. I don't really like this move. More natural is queen e2, keeping an eye on this pawn and also just keeping the rooks connected, at least one move later. Now after queen d1, this is like a non-developing move. e6, very natural and principled reaction. You want to open up the center. Bishop f4, also a very natural reaction. The bishop has to be developed sooner rather than later, and bishop f4 is a good square, attacking this d6 pawn and perhaps insinuating some e5 ideas. e5 by black here, blocking in this bishop and trying to block the position because they have the 2 knights. Now this is interesting because also e takes d5 is playable, but I much prefer what Stanojoski did. The engine though prefers e takes d5, but yeah, leave that to the engine. Bishop e3, just retreating. Now perhaps bishop g5 would have been more annoying because that would have forced h6, and h6 isn't super desirable for black because it creates a hook for white to attack, so maybe that would have been slightly better. But anyway, bishop e3, and now his opponent goes for h6, which is weird. Like, why would you go for that on your own? But hey, he does. Alright, instead knight d7 made more sense, opening up for f5 ideas. Anyway, h6, queen d2, attacking h6, king h7, natural reaction to protect. Bishop g2, preparing f4, a6, preparing b5, and now f4. Perhaps a bit mistimed, perhaps white should have held down the position and played rook a1 and then thought about f4. Actually, what's funny here is that I've played a game against Gio, a blitz game against Gio, where he also mistimed f4. The idea, it was also in the same structure actually, because I was playing the Czech Benoni. Yeah, so here his opponent transposed from a normal Benoni into a Czech Benoni kind of pawn structure. Yeah, so here the point is that white has a lot of time, so you can really slow roll f4, make sure everything, all the pieces are on the right squares, and then play f4 at the right time. Here f4 is a bit premature. Now his opponent goes for knight h5, very good move, showing why f4 is mistimed. And here Gio should have simply played king h2, which does look a bit scary because of all of these dark squares, and you might think of some sacrifices, but nothing really is working there. Instead he played f takes e5, allowing knight takes g3, and after rook f3, white's pawns are just not there. They're not protecting the key squares, while black's king is very much safe. This pawn makes for a bad impression as well, and black will be crashing through on the dark squares, so white is of course worse here, but still not losing. However, after knight takes g3, the only path to equality was perhaps e takes d6. A very, very interesting move. The point is that after knight takes f1, rook takes f1, queen takes d6, now you have this brilliant e5 move, and if takes occurs, you have this. And this should be about equal because white has the bishop pair, and actually maybe they wouldn't even recover the exchange here, like after a5, let's say, white maybe doesn't even take here, because then they would have dark square problems and stuff like that. Maybe like you can just follow up with other normal moves. The point is that the bishop pair here is very strong, and you have some nice pawns, so you're of course not lost here. And by the way, just taking a look here, if bishop takes, of course there's bishop takes h6 at the very least, maybe even knight e4 ideas as well. Knight e4 with bishop takes c5. So white is doing okay in that line. It's basically equal. However, rook f3 cedes control of the advantage for black. So here bishop takes e5, bishop takes h6, queen e7, and now bishop takes f8. Perhaps also wrong, and very nice by his opponent to sacrifice the exchange like this. Perhaps better was simply rook e1, solidifying this pawn, and really perhaps going for bishop f4, bishop e3 ideas, just trying to defend the dark squares. Instead, bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, and now rook e1, and now queen h4. Still, this position is reasonable for white, because after queen f2, black doesn't really have anything, and at some point you're threatening rook takes g3, and rook takes f7 is of course the immediate threat, and at some point if the bishop moves, of course you're threatening rook takes g3, and maybe you have rook e3 ideas. So this would have still held the path toward equality, but Gio unfortunately plays queen c1, which is like not only removing the queen from the queen side, like queen f2, at least you're kind of defending on the queen side, you know, your opponent is attacking you on the king side, so you try to defend, put your pieces there. Queen c1 is just moving the queen out of the way to the queen side, where it's not really doing much, and also it's kind of in the line of fire here, so you can't move the rook because then a fork would hit, so not the best move. And now king g7, very nice move by his opponent, preparing perhaps rook h8 and getting the king to an even safer square on g7. Here, however, Gio had queen d2, and still he would have been in the game. Again, you need to get out of all of this nasty stuff on d3 and just try to at least protect the king somehow. Queen c1 isn't really doing anything. However, he does play knight e2, which is trying to trade off this knight, but his opponent has knight takes e4, simply winning a pawn. And now Gio plays knight c3, trying again to also, by the way, just note the time here, so actually you can't see the time. Yeah, so this is the time, and now there is a spoiler that Gio lost. Just 1 second, make sure we get the scrap right. Yeah, so going back here, okay, so knight c3, instead of knight c3, which is a game losing blunder, he could have played rook ef1, but again, of course, black is slightly better here to even being better. But now after knight c3, the game is simply lost because of knight g5, and there's simply no defense. If rook f e3, there's bishop d4, and it's GG. And if rook ef1, you're just sacrificing the exchange. So there are too many threats here. White is just lost. Like even if you go back, of course, just this. So here, knight takes f3, and going more slowly, you lose all your pawns, and yeah, the game is over. Knight d3 is a nice way to finish after rook f2, pinning and winning and trading more pieces. So very tough loss for Gio there, but his opponent again played so marvelously well. We've seen another game where Gio's opponent also played this well as black, in the King's Indian actually. I think it was in round 6, so you might want to check that out. So his opponent just played too well, and Gio missed some crucial ideas. Okay, so here we've already lost 2 games, remember, because of Faisal's forfeit. So that means we're down 2 games. So our only chance now is to draw the match. So let's see what Amr did against Lazov Toni Lazov. So e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, bishop b5. Not quite the Rosalimo, but similar. And now this line. I'm going to zip through the opening, and now we get to see the craziness of this opening. b4. Trying to go for some of these ideas. C takes b4, and now knight d5. Of course, you don't really take now, because then you're just trading pieces for no good reason and ruining your pawn structure, and yeah, you're not down a pawn there, but yeah, it's quite stupid to do that. So knight d5, that's the point of the opening. Now you're threatening to take, and you're threatening to take here. So very interesting line actually. And now knight c6, actually very rare as well. Knight c6 is quite interesting because it aims to win the game, right? So there's a much easier path to equality, which is simply knight takes f3 check, queen takes f3, bishop g7, attacking the rook has to move, and now e6, the knight has to move back. You can't take here because then your knight would be trapped after a5. So knight e7 developing, rook takes b4, and now d5. And when you get this d5 break-in in the Sicilian, you're usually quite fine, and you're able to take and develop your bishop, for example. And this position should be about equal and probably better for black. However, he plays knight c6, which aims at more complications without trading pieces. Though to be honest, that knight takes f3 line is like not even drawish or anything. So I would have preferred that. But okay, he plays this, and now his opponent goes for bishop b2. Perhaps not the most accurate. Perhaps more accurate was rook b1, which is a move you want to play anyway, or simply castles developing. But bishop b2 should be fine. And now f6, a very bad move actually, even though it seems natural. Of course, the more natural move is just knight f6, but Amr didn't want to see any of these pawn structures, which I do understand, but there's nothing there for white actually, so it's completely fine. I mean, white still has an advantage, but you know, actually, do they? No, that line maybe it's about equal, or even black has an advantage due to the misplaced white pieces, right? Because then if you take, if you imagine that position, yeah, there's always like an early d5, and the white bishops aren't really doing anything in that kind of pawn structure, especially this bishop. So yeah. Instead of knight f6, he plays f6, and this is very bad because of the next move, which is h4. And now this kind of pawn structure always invites this kind of pawn push, because this pawn is so weak and all of the light squares are going to collapse. So, oops. Amr plays e6, dislodging the knight, and now knight e3. A very natural move, which was actually though played after 9 minutes of thought. So I bet his opponent actually did see the text move, the best move, which is h5. Crazy, I know. h5 is actually almost completely winning. It's actually very, very good for white. The point of this piece sacrifice after e takes d5 is that you have e takes d5 back with a Mora-esque kind of compensation, right? And after knight e5 you just take, and you can take here, and taking here is coming, and all of this. And yeah, this position is clearly losing. By the way, like for example, queen e7, you can even just castle, because after takes you have rook e1. So this position just looks winning, you know. I can't really explain it beyond that. You just have to appreciate them. Like, just look at the black pieces. all of them underdeveloped. Well, you have two very strong bishops, you have an attack here, your rook is open, your queen can come to e2, your king can castle at any moment, this king needs 7 billion moves to castle. So yeah, all of that is quite good for white, and actually white here would be winning. If instead after h5 not accepting the piece sacrifice but rather playing bishop g7, this still isn't helping much, because after h takes g6, h takes g6, takes, now knight f4, and here this pawn is basically, it's impossible to defend. There's also e5 at any point, so now bishop g7, oops, bishop g7, knight takes g6, and white is completely winning as well. However, well, not completely winning on that line, but yeah, practically completely winning. However, he plays knight e6, knight e3 after 9 minutes of thought, so I bet he was considering that line. Or maybe he was just considering knight f4, I don't know. But anyway, and now Amr goes for h6. This like further weakens, so I don't really get this move. I understand like in some positions you want to prevent knight g5. Like maybe he was even afraid of knight g5 immediately. The point being you can't take because of takes. But just natural development with bishop g7 would have been much better actually. However, he plays h6, and now his opponent goes for the correct e5, which is of course very natural. And now f5, and now h5, g5, g4, all of these very, very precise moves by his opponent, trying to open up the right squares. Yeah, and this is a big weakness, and the bishop is here. f4 by Amr, which is perhaps not so accurate, but I mean it's difficult to suggest anything else. Bishop g6 check, king e7, knight c4. Yeah, this looks like complete domination, right? But again, this is a classical game. You're playing against Amro Jawich. It's not easy to convert this. So bishop g7, knight d6. The knight moves back, knight f7, winning the exchange. And here a3. Actually, even better here would have been bishop e4, just not allowing knight takes g6. Yeah, trying maybe for long-term e5, or simply a3, which is what he played in the game. Here, however, after a3, now knight takes g6 is a good move, because after takes you have, whoops, so knight takes g6, h6, g6. Now you have bishop g7, which is actually a very, very good move. Because you're blocking any white pawn pushes, and actually white here has difficulty getting into the position. So actually here white isn't completely winning, at least. But after b5, now there comes bishop e4. Now no longer knight takes g6 is no longer possible. So yeah, white is again close to winning. We'll take a look at these moves quickly. They're all very natural moves. Some pieces get traded, and yeah, there isn't much to discuss here. Of course, white has an extra exchange, but they have this bad pawn, this bad bishop, so all is not completely over. And these kinds of incursions don't do anything because of the bishop defending quite well, so it's not so easy for white just yet. And now, knight c7, which turns out to be a game-losing blunder because of a sacrifice we'll see about 5 times now, and which actually does eventually occur in the game. But actually here, this sacrifice could have been played just immediately. And now, boom, g5, and if takes, boom, and h6 is coming. This and this are coming as well. Even at some point this, depending on where the knight goes. So this is actually completely winning for white. Though it's difficult to sacrifice a piece like this, especially because you're up in exchange. But here it turns out that that's basically the best way to break through, because black does have kind of a fortress going on down in exchange, but this knight is annoying, and these pawns are restricting white somewhat. However, his opponent plays king h2. And now knight d5, rook 1 a2, knight c7 back, again allowing bishop takes f4, but his opponent doesn't play it. Rook c2. So a lot of shuffling here, not much going on. And now, yeah, instead of rook ea1, he could have played bishop takes f4, but now rook ea1. And here his opponent Amr should have played queen d5, Again, now bishop takes f4 doesn't really work because the queen is so close by. So that would have delayed it at least, or maybe prevented it, gave Amr some chances. However, rook c6 was played, blocking in the queen again, and now finally his opponent does find bishop takes f4, g takes f4. Very, very nice by his opponent to find this move. g5 takes, and queen h7 instead of queen g6, but both are winning. And yeah, here it's just a crushing attack. Amr has to sacrifice here, and all of these come with checks, and his king is defended. h7 is coming, so no chances there for his for Amr. So very nice game by his opponent, to be honest, Lazov. He played a very rare line in the Sicilian, got a nice attack. Amr defended very well. There were a lot of crazy complications, but then at some point Amr lost the exchange, and Lazov, instead of keeping the tension and just going on for 50 more moves and even maybe acquiescing to a draw, he does find the punch. The bishop takes f4. Very nice move there. And yeah, congrats to Lazov. Unfortunately for us, we're down 3-0 here, so we've already lost this match. So let's see what happened on the third board. Chagan isn't I mean, technically I guess this is the fourth board. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so let's see what happened here. Yeah, so Antoine playing against Veljanoski Andrej. So let's see what happened in this game. This game actually it was a brilliant affair in the sense that both sides were playing so accurately. So we get to see this Maroczy bind, and Antoine gets this early piece trade. That's why in the Maroczy I really like playing an early knight c2, even as early as now. Because this line, okay, you've traded off one pair of pieces. I don't know how white is exactly winning these positions. And here, this kind of queen a5 line is good as well, adding pressure to the queen side. And yeah, black has a lot of pressure here, but white should still be fine. But I don't also like rook b1. Maybe just rook c1 is simpler. But again, b5 is an annoying move that's coming, so yeah, but rook c1 kind of rook ac1 kind of avoids that, because then you have taking and you're defending the knight from this stuff. But anyway, rook a b1, he saw that after b4 he can play this, and this just trades off one more pair of pieces, and queen c3, basically forcing the queen trade. And yeah, I mean, I don't get why white should be any better. I think white played like too tradey there. Knight d7, bishop e3 takes, yeah, more piece trades. And now, actually, in this very calm position, Antoine plays a big error actually. The problem here is that this this a pawn is actually almost lost, believe it or not. So that's why you have to play rook b8 to get out of the spin, and I'll talk about this in a moment. Or quite simply king f8. The point is not to lock in the bishop as you would have after king g7. After king g7, Andrej finds the very good. So after king g7, this was a completely equal position, or white being slightly better. Of course, white is still slightly better. They have the bishop pair, even though this bishop is hemmed in, and they have possibilities on the queen side. So of course, white is still slightly better. But after king g7, white is actually much better, because there's rook b3. And now after bishop f6, rook a3, and well, bishop takes b5. Now this bishop, which was seemingly quite bad, right? Now it's doing a good job. So yeah, the pawn is basically lost here. And if we imagine something like knight b8, this doesn't really help because of rook a5. You don't really want to take immediately because of potential bishop b2s, though I guess that's still working. But rook a5 just is very easy, because after bishop c3, again, now definitely you don't want to take because of bishop takes b4. So you just play a3, and well, bishop takes b5 is unpreventable now. However, after rook a3, his opponent plays bishop b2, which also just loses. After rook a5, rook c8. Again, if bishop c3, we have a3. Taking rook here and rook c6, and yeah, even rook c2 trying to activate. There's rook c6, just kicking the rook out, forcing a rook trade actually. Bishop c3 of course isn't really playable. You have, well, actually a tactic. So so yeah, like his opponent completely, like, it's amazing. You just take a look at this position. Like, you take a look at the way the game was played, a lot of piece trades, blah blah blah, and then you take a look at this position. Okay, white is slightly better, but black should be able to hold this endgame, or at least not lose immediately. But then you look like, whoops, king g7, boom, and like this crazy maneuver, rook b3, rook a3, attacking a6 because b5 is loose due to the bishop. Crazy. And in just a few moves, white won the game. Yeah, very unfortunate loss by Antoine there. The game really, like, there wasn't much to be talked about there. Happens, unfortunately for us. This round just wasn't our round. We got like, we lost, like, we didn't have any chances even, right, in none of the 3 games almost. Actually, yeah, I don't think any side was even better for one move in those 3 games. And yeah, we lost one board due to forfeit, so that definitely affected the team spirit and explains half of the result at least. Unfortunate, but it happens. So let's see how we'll bounce back in round 9. With that, thanks for watching, guys, and take care.